Tower of Glass by Twin Tribes consists of 4 different sections, and across those 4, we're going to cover 2 guitar parts, a bass line, and a synth lead melody that I've transcribed for guitar. Before we get busy, as always, I want to give a shout out to my patrons over on Patreon, because it's your support that allows me to continue to create this content to share across these platforms. Thank you. I truly appreciate you and all of your support. And a special shout out to Aaron for requesting this video. I love Tower of Glass, and I had a really good time ripping this apart to analyze it so that way I could break it down for this video. As a friendly reminder, I do take requests for lessons, covers, and general transcriptions from my patrons over on Patreon. If you're looking for tabs for Tower of Glass, they can be located on my Patreon along with various other Twin Tribes transcriptions, including Cauldron of Thorns, Heart and Feather, and The River. They can be accessed by either becoming a paid member or as individual purchases on my feed and within my shop. I've also compiled all of the Twin Tribes content together into the collections area on my Patreon for ease of access. And I've also compiled all the long and short form content into playlists on my YouTube channel, also for ease of access. As always, we will be subbing out picking amounts and rhythms with language. 1 hit will be bean, 2 hits will be taco, 3 hits will be burrito, 4 hits will be quesadilla, when and where applicable. The methodology behind this approach is that it'll allow us to play difficult rhythm patterns and incorporate speed in a more fluid and natural fashion. Tower of Glass is in the key of E minor, and as discussed across the various other Twin Tribes content that I've broken down, we will be operating in 2-measure phrases. The verses, and the interludes all consist of the same bass riff. So by learning this one riff, we'll triple down on our time and learn 3 different sections. We will be playing 2 notes, but 3 different pitches, and we will be playing them for straight 8th notes the entire way. We're going to start with our index finger on the 2nd fret of the 4th string, which is E, and then the second note that we're going to go to is C on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, and the last note that we're going to grab is the open 6th string, which is also an E. So we have an octave. So these are both the same note, but 2 different pitches. And when we kick this off, we will start with our index finger on that 2nd fret of the 4th string for a full measure of straight 8th notes, as in 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then we'll go to our middle finger on the 3rd fret of the 5th string for another full measure of straight 8th notes, as in quesadilla, enchilada. And that'll set us up to finish on our open 6th string, our E, for 2 full bars, which will be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, quesadilla, enchilada. And as we piece that whole thing together, it'll be 1 and 2 and 1st finger, 4th string, go. 1 and 2 and now your middle finger, and then here's the open 6th string, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and quesadilla. Then we add speed with 1 and 2 and 3, then your middle, and 1 and 2 and 3, open 6th string, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then just like that for the rest of the way. And then we just keep adding speed until we come up to that tempo. To me, this really establishes the tonal center being E minor, because we have our octave Cs, and then we have that minor 6th, our C, on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, sandwiched in between them, and that's that hallmark sound of the post-punk and dark wave genres. However, I am always open to interpretation, to harmonic analysis, and I'm always open to being wrong, because another way to look at this is that it's a C major chord, where we have our root, our C, and then we have our E, which would be our major 3rd, and then we tuck that major 3rd underneath that C, giving us a really beautiful dissonance. And that dissonance, using the major 3rd underneath our root, is something that we definitely hear across different forms of media in movies and music, but most notably in recent times in the Stranger Things theme. The theme for Stranger Things is mainly going to utilize a C major 7 arpeggio, and we're going to play that with our root on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, and then that will be our C. That'll lead you to your major 3rd on the 7th fret of the 5th string, your E, And then your middle finger can grab your G, your perfect fifth, on the 5th fret of the 4th string, leading you to do a hammer pull from the major 7th on the 4th fret of the 3rd string, your B, to your octave, your C. And then we'll use that to walk back down to your G and then your E. And then the whole thing will restart. But where that dissonance comes in is in the 2nd chord. The very first strike that we hear, it's utilizing, I believe, an octave from our C's, which I don't have because I'm in standard at this moment. But the second hit that we have, that is bringing in that major 3rd underneath that C to make that minor 6 sound. Another defining factor within the melodies across Twin Tribe's catalog is the use of tonal sequences, which essentially means that we're going to take the rhythm and the interval choices from one group of notes and then copy and paste it or drag it over and play that same exact thing across the next set of notes, another set of pitches. We've seen this exhibited in both melodies and harmonies. The interludes are going to consist of a melody that's played across the 4th string in its entirety. However, to push back and give that melody a little bit more intrigue, we're going to use the open 3rd string the entire way, which is our minor 3rd. This is also, to me, establishing that idea that E minor is our tonal center. We will be starting with your index finger on the 7th fret of that 4th string, which is A, which will position your ring finger to go to the 9th fret of that same 4th string, which is B. Your fingers are wanting to set up in a sequential fashion, so that way each finger gets its own fret. So your distance is already set up from one another. And we will mostly be playing straight 8th notes. However, we will incorporate ties, especially when we're transitioning one melodic note to the next one. As we start this, we're going to start from that ring finger on the 9th fret of the 4th string, our B, and we're going to use the open 3rd string against it. And we will do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 4th, 3rd, 4th, left. Or if we use words, it'll be burrito left, and then it would repeat burrito left. And as we move to that left on the and of 2, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, we're going to tie that and of 2 to the downbeat of 3. And on the and of 3, we're going to come in from the open 3rd string, 3 and 4 and we're going to use the open 3rd string to go back to the 4th string as you're still holding that A on the 7th fret and then finishing on that 3rd string. We will play that whole phrase, that whole figure twice, and that'll be pretty much all the heavy lifting out of the way. So altogether, that'll sound like this. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and repeat burrito left. And then we drag this to the left after we do that second repeat, or pardon me, after we do the second part of that, after we repeat it once and play it the second time. We are going to drag that over to the 2nd fret on the same 4th string because our melody is going to be played across it, as we mentioned earlier. And this will position your ring finger to be on the 4th fret of that 4th string. Our index finger is playing E. Our ring finger is playing F sharp, which will give us a really beautiful dissonance between this minor 2nd of that F sharp to that open G. And again, we are utilizing tonal sequences, which essentially just means that whatever we did here in this first phrase across this set of pitches, when we did 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and with that specific rhythm, it'll get copied and pasted and we will drag it to the left and we will play that here across this set of pitches with that same exact rhythm across the same string set, which will end up resulting in this, which will be 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and burrito left, tortilla. Now you can play this with any fingering that you so choose. You can play this all with one digit if you preferred, but I like the idea of sequential fingering. I like the idea of maintaining positions and each finger getting their own assigned fret. So that way when we scoot over from one position to the next one, we are in the most advantageous positions to be able to incorporate more notes that we're going to end up using across one riff to another, one lick to another. But again, player's poison. You could do this with any fingering that you would like once we figure out the pitches as you so choose. Something else that really establishes this tonal center is when we go to the verses. Because in the verses, Luis does not play anything on the record. And it's just that same bass line that we had worked through before, where we were playing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and quesadilla, enchilada, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then we do the same thing every single time that it comes back around. However, if you've seen them play live, or if you just watch live videos of this song, Luis will often bring in a chord and he'll push this across the first beat of 4 measures, 4 bars. And that chord that he plays is an E minor chord. Sometimes he'll grab this from the first 3 strings open, which is an E minor chord consisting of E, G, and B. So we'd have E on the open first string, G on the open third string, and B on the open second string. Other times it looks like he does grab it with his middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 4th string, which is just adding an octave of E on the 2nd fret of that 4th string. You can incorporate your index finger to grab B, the 5th above it, or you can play it as a full-on E minor chord. And us knowing that it's an E minor chord opens the idea for us to play it in other positions or in other ways in general, other voicings, because he doesn't do it the exact same way every single time. And I believe that he just adds it in for flavor and for filler. Choruses are mostly going to utilize one picking pattern across 3 different chords. Again, tonal sequences coming into play, and I believe it's helpful if we can visualize said chords before working on the rhythm pattern itself. The first chord that we're going to play is a B minor chord. Our first finger is going to bar across the 2nd and 3rd strings at the 7th fret, while your ring finger is going to grab the 9th fret on the 4th string. The 7th fret on the 2nd string is F sharp, your index finger on the 3rd string, 7th fret, is D, and then your ring finger is playing B, our root, our minor 3rd, and then our perfect 5th. And yes, our index finger is technically going over the 1st string, but we're not actually going to incorporate that note. So I'm only referring to the strings that we're actually going to be playing in reference to the bar. But speaking of in reference to the bar, if we wanted to, we could have our index finger prepared within the bar at the 4th string instead of just the first 3 strings. So that way, when we go to the 2nd chord, all we have to do is release your ring finger, and thus we'll be at the 2nd chord. The 2nd chord is a D major chord in 2nd inversion. We have D, F sharp, and A as our notes in our D major chord, our root major 3rd, and then our perfect 5th, and our A is on the bottom. So thus we are in 2nd inversion. And again, player's poison. If we wanted to bring our index finger up when you transition on the and of 4 to that D major chord, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you're more than welcome to do so. But these ideas of preparing our fingers for what's going to come next really enforces the economy of motion, so that way you have the least amount of movement possible, and it lets us focus on just straight playing. It'll let us turn off so that way we can turn on to the music a lot quicker and a lot easier. and we'll be able to move through it with more fluidity. And it's something that we do in art music all the time, and it's really helpful when we transition that into other genres that are outside of just straight classical music. The last chord that we're going to play is an E minor chord in first inversion. We have a G on the 5th fret of the 4th string, and then our ring finger is going to be playing D, the minor 7th, and then on the 7th fret of the 3rd string, pardon me, and then our E on the 2nd string, 5th fret is our root, and that is our minor 3rd, minor 7th, and then our root on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings. The picking pattern across the first 2 chords are going to be identical, and we were going to be playing, again, mostly straight 8th notes until we get to the chord change, which will arrive on the and of 4. We're going to have our B minor shape, and we're going to pick from the 4th string down to the 2nd string in order. Then we're going to come back up to the 3rd string. It'll be 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 3rd, 1 and 2 and after we cross over those first 2 beats, we're already halfway done with our first measure. 1 and 2 and 3 and as we cross and go into beat 3, we're going to hit the 2nd to the 3rd string again, and then that'll send you up to your ring finger on beat 4 on the 4th string, and then we're going to have that moving bass line move over on the and of 4. So that whole thing will be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Or if we brought in words, it'll be quesadilla, taco, go left. And once we arrive on that D major in second inversion, we will have the same exact picking pattern here. We're going to come from the and of 4, but since our ring finger, when we played that B minor chord, started on 1 and 2, we have already started. We shift over on the and of 4, and then we tie that to the downbeat of 1, as in 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So when we hit that and of 4, we've just taken that downbeat of 1 and we've brought it over by just an 8th note, and we tie it over it, but that rhythm pattern, the picking pattern, the string selection itself is still identical. When we move that over, after we come down from that 4th string, we will still hit 3rd, 2nd, 3rd, 2nd, 3rd, and then our bass note will move to that last chord, our E minor 7. So before getting to that last chord, something that can really help is getting the flow of those first 2 chords to move from one another. And that would sound something like this. 1 and 2 and ready and go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Burrito, taco, go left. And we can loop that so that way we can really instill where the pulse is at. Once we arrive on that final chord, our E minor 7, we will see a little bit of differentiation in that picking pattern because we are not going to change chords in the second half of this phrase. The first 2 bars of this chorus consisted of the B minor and then the D, and those were 2 different chords that are a part of the same 2 measure phrase. But when we arrive on that E minor 7, we will have 1 chord over that phrase, over that grouping of 2. However, we will mainly have the same exact picking pattern that we had from before, and all we'll have to compensate for is us not moving to a new bass note on the and of 4. Instead, we're going to stay within this chord, and the whole picking pattern will begin as it did before, which will be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And now, once we get to that and of 4, we're going to come down to the 2nd string 5th fret, which your first finger is already holding inside of that bar. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and it's in the second measure that we have that differentiation. So after we cross through and we play that first measure, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and, we're gonna come in on the and of 1, 1 and 2 and we're gonna go from the 4th to the 2nd string and then back to the 3rd string. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then we're gonna go back to the second to the third, and then finish with the fourth going back to the second string, as in 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that last hit on the and of 4 with our index finger on that second string is what'll shift us over and get back to, or pardon me, shift us over to get back to that B minor chord, so the whole thing can repeat. And now that whole thing with the repeat will sound like this. 1 and 2 and ready and now go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and go left 1. Burrito, taco, and say 1 and then we repeat, then go. 1 and 2 and 3, then go left 1. Burrito, taco, and then 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, then add speed 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 more 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, then go left 1. Burrito, taco, and then burrito, taco, and then. And now we add one last piece to that chorus on the fourth repetition, and it's a 2-bar extension. So once we finish that fourth round, that E minor 7 the fourth time, and we do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, we would take that last measure where when we came to the and of 4 and we tied over to the downbeat of 1 with that second string, 5th fret, we do that again. So the E minor, once we get to that last repetition, it'll take that 2-bar grouping that we were referencing earlier, where we have the B minor and then the D on one hand, and then the E minor on this hand. And what we're essentially doing is just adding another one of those E minors for a group of 2. And a way to better demonstrate it would be to do it this way. So that way we would have the first 2 chords, the B minor and then the D, the first 2 E minors, and then the extension on the extras on the second side. One adjustment that one can make if we're having trouble sneaking that E on the and of 4 when it goes back to that B minor chord with the bar is you can also release the bar as a whole and play an open E as well, as in 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then burrito, taco, then open. It's the same exact note, it's the same exact pitch, it's just gonna have a different tonality from, say, these fretted notes on the second string that we're grabbing. So again, player's poison, more than one way to do something. And now for my favorite part, which is a little bit of super nerdy analysis. If we analyze the bass line in the chorus, we have a G that we can play on the 3rd fret of the 6th string. We have F sharp that we can play on the 2nd fret of the same 6th string, and then an open E that we can also play on the 6th string. And we're gonna play these with, again, primarily straight 8s until they follow the chord changes on the and of 4, as in 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Then it repeat every single time with 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2, and just like that every single time. However, if I took that up an octave and I played those same 3 pitches, but I played them here on the 10th, 9th, and the 7th frets of the 5th string, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just like that, I can incorporate them with the chords themselves, and we might find something a little bit interesting. If I take that G that's getting played over the first chord, which was that B minor, and I add it to it, it becomes a G major 7. And I have my G, my root, B from the B minor, and then our D, the perfect 5th, and then F sharp, which is the major 7th in a G major 7. If I add that F sharp into the mix of what we were doing with that D major chord, it can be looked at in two different ways. It can be looked at as still a D major, except now we have an extra F sharp, what we were playing on the 2nd string 7th fret. We just add an octave in. So now instead of being in 2nd inversion, it would be in 1st inversion. Another way that we can look at this is that it's an F sharp minor 6 chord. We have our F sharp, we have an A, which makes this a minor 3rd, and then we have D, which gives us that 6. And then we have the octave F sharp again at the top. The last shape that we would have actually doesn't change, because when we bring in this E, that just puts that E minor 7 chord that we played in a root position, where we have E as our root, our minor 3rd still on that G, the 5th fret of the 4th string, our 7th fret, which is D on the 3rd string, and then the E, which is now an octave on the 2nd string, 5th fret. So some interesting things that can happen once we start cross-referencing the bass line with the chords themselves, with the harmony, and how it opens more doors for us to think about how it is that they're playing this, or how it is that they're composing this. The reason this functions well together is because of something that I've discussed across the other Twin Tribes content that I've broken down, and it's the diatonic mediant relationship, which is the distance between one note and another note that's a 1/3 away from each other, up or down, forward or backwards. And we can see this between chords like, say, A minor and C, or from A minor to F major 7, and how they share a lot of common tones between one another. And this is that thing that I've also discussed with a lot of intrigue in relation to their compositions and their writing style, how they piece this all together. Are they considering these implications when they're piecing this stuff together, or are they just jamming this stuff? Is one person coming to the table with a bass line and then they drop the chord pattern over it, or the other way, which is very plausible as well, where the guitar part gets made first and then they piece the bass line on top of it afterwards? Nonetheless, it's likely something that they picked up from learning the music that they loved. So the whole idea behind this and learning these things is that it's all vocabulary for what our ears are already probably used to hearing, because this is stuff that isn't limited to Twin Tribes or post-punk or dark wave. We can see this exhibited in pop music, in reggae, in rock, in funk, in soul, everywhere, across other instruments as well. And it's this kind of thing that'll help us go from one instrument to the next one, or incorporate these kinds of concepts in our own compositions, in our own writing. If we're trying to write music that's similar to this, or if we're making exercises, or something that's really important to note as we get more and more comfortable with this vocabulary, if we're using Twin Tribes to learn how to play the instrument in the first place. But just food for thought in case we need a snack. When playing the synth lead melody, I am incorporating a little bit of dirt, as I do with virtually all of the synth lead melodies that I transcribe for guitar. And the ironic part is that this doesn't sound like a little bit of dirt. But just for frame of reference, I'm using a Friedman BEOD Deluxe, which has a 3-band EQ. And I'm not adjusting my settings a whole hell of a lot, to be honest, because I like a mostly one sound fits all kind of thing. And for reference again, I have my gain all the way down. I have an internal trem pot for this channel. I'm on the lower gain channel. I have it mostly all the way down. And I have the high end frequencies, the presence, I have a lot of it rolled off, as I also do the treble. And my tight switch is right in the center, sorry, it's a really, really small switch, toggle switch. But with these settings, I think I get enough bite where it doesn't inherently sound really, really dirty, but it just adds to the high end frequencies that are translating from a totally different instrument to guitar. Speaking of translating other instruments that aren't guitar to guitar, when I'm transcribing something for guitar, something that I'm always thinking about is tone and how I want to keep tone consistent. This is something that I've been discussing at length in the various other Twin Tribes and lessons that I've done and posted. And to do so, I tend to keep things on the same string as much as I can. So as we descend this E minor scale from the 20th fret, I keep all the pitches except for the last one on that second string. But once we find the pitches themselves, once we find the notes, we can reorder this and place this anywhere across the neck that we would like. We will be descending an E minor scale from our minor third, our G on the 20th fret of that second string. We're gonna have G, F sharp, and E as we walk down. And the rhythms that we're gonna put on this are gonna be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And I'm accenting and saying that 2 harder to give us a cue for us to hit our middle finger on the F sharp on the and of 2. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. We will play this part once, but once we get that rhythm down, we're going to use that across the next set of pitches, which will bring us to the 17th fret and the 15th frets, still on the second string. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And we're going to use the 15, then 17, then 15. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So same rhythm, utilizing a sequence again. And we're going to cap this out by playing our middle finger on the 16th fret of the third string, which is a B. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And we play it for 2 bars before it repeats. 1 and 2 and 3, then we move. 1 and 2 and 3, then your middle, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then it repeats again over and over with 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Add a little vibrato to make it nice, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And if that rhythm sounds familiar, it's because it's the same exact rhythm that we utilize on that 4-string melody from the Interludes when we did 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Very sneaky, very, very cool. Again, you can relocate this anywhere that you would like, anywhere that you prefer. Once we find those pitches, you can play this mostly at the 12th fret, where if we're thinking about, say, our roots in terms of 3-note per string scales or, say, pentatonic boxes, this would be our E on the 12th fret of our 6th string, so it would be like minor pentatonic box number 1, or position 1 for 3-note per string shapes. And we can grab G on the 15th fret of the 1st string, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And that finger distance will be the exact same that we had back here. And the fret distance will be the same. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then we would have to string skip as we grab the 15th on the 2nd string. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4. And really we can find a bunch of other ways and positions that we can play it in. Again, player's poison. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to check out this video. If you liked it, give it a like, leave me some feedback in the comments. I engage with virtually everything that I see, whether it's positive or negative. If you love Twin Tribes, if you disagree with my harmonic analysis, if you think the language methodology is stupid, trust me, I know it's stupid. But if any of you are educators and you're trying to get your students to play things that may be out of the realm of what they can read, but they could likely play, especially if they know those songs, if they can hum them, if they know them really well by ear, the language thing goes a really long way to trim a lot of the fat to be able to get them to do things that they might not be able to do otherwise. But just more food for thought again in case we need a snack. But is anybody seeing Twin Tribes this year? Has anybody already seen them? By the end of the year, I'm hoping that I'll be able to see them. I didn't get to catch them in 2025, but I did see them in the previous 3 years before that, at least once a year, and twice in my city. And it's really cool to see people like that in my backyard. I've seen Nine Inch Nails this year in the Bay Area in San Francisco, but virtually all the other shows that I've been to this year have just all been in my backyard. I've just saw Cathedral Bells. I saw French Police earlier in the year. I saw Duran Jones in the Indications. I'm gonna see Ultrasun. I got tickets for them. Eric Johnson is coming to my area as well. Psychedelic Furs are coming here. Juanes is coming. And it's just shaping up to be a really solid year where I'm at. But hopefully I'll end up catching Twin Tribes when they announce more dates. Thank you again for your time. I greatly appreciate it. Be safe out there, y'all. Peace.